You know that perfect, expensive silence you get from high-end, noise-canceling headphones? That pressurized hush that feels like cotton being packed into your ears, that's my job. I'm a podcast editor. My official title is audio engineer, but really, I'm a sonic janitor. I live in that pressurized hush for 10 hours a day, hunting and killing the blemishes of human speech, the uhs, the umps, the little mouth clicks, the sound of a shirt rustling against a lapel mic. I clean the sonic space so the listener can just hear the voice. IT started 3 days ago, on a Tuesday. I was working on a file for a true crime show. The Kessler Murders, I think. It was a standard 2-track recording, host on the left, guest on the right. My workflow is muscle memory. Find the flaw, highlight, delete, close the gap. I was cleaning up the host's track when I found it. It wasn't a glitch. A glitch is noisy. It's a pop, a digital screech, a stutter. This was a void dot on my screen. The audio waveform looks like a mountain range. A voice is a series of peaks and valleys. This was a canyon. A perfect, vertical drop to absolute zero. For exactly 1.5 seconds, the host's audio track didn't just go quiet, it ceased to exist. That's weird, I muttered, popping one side of my headphones off. The air in my apartment was still. Just the hum of my PC. I scrubbed the audio, playing the section over and over. Host, he told the police he had never, absolute, total, pressurized silence. 1.5 seconds, seen the woman before in his life. The transition was sickening. It wasn't a fade. It was an amputation. The sound was just gone. The data was missing. Corrupted file, I guessed. I highlighted the void and tried to paste in the room tone, the background hiss of the host's recording room. To smooth it over, the software gave me an error. Operation cannot be completed. I tried again. Operation cannot be completed. I zoomed in. The waveform, which should have been a fuzzy, static line of room tone, was just a flat, dead line. Dead zero. $0.00 dB. I cranked the gain on that section, boosting the volume to maximum. Usually, if you boost silence, you get something. The hiss of the preamp. The hum of an air conditioner. The sound of the host's own blood rushing in his ears. This time, nothing. I cranked the gain until the rest of the recording was a distorted, screaming brick of noise. But that 1.5 second chunk remained silent. It wasn't just empty silence. It felt heavy. It felt cold. It was a silence that pushed back, like being at the bottom of a deep, dark pool. I shivered. Even though my apartment was warm, I deleted the whole file, messaged the producer, and said the track was corrupted. Send me the raw backup, I typed. I leaned back in my chair, rolling my shoulders. The silence of my headphones suddenly felt uncomfortable. I took them off and rubbed my ears. The new file came through. I downloaded it, opened it, and went straight to the same timestamp. The void was still there, exactly 1.5 seconds long. Exactly the same place. My blood went cold. This wasn't a glitch in my system. It was in the source file. I scrubbed back and listened to the guest's track, the one that was recorded on a separate microphone, hundreds of miles away. Guest, right, and the timeline is crucial. During that 1.5 second void, the guest's track was perfect. He just kept talking. So, for 1.5 seconds, the host had been speaking, but his microphone, a $4,000 professional-grade piece of equipment, had recorded nothing. An abyss. I worked around it. I cut the host's sentence short. It sounded awkward, but it was the only way. I finished the episode, exported it, and sent the invoice. I tried to forget about it. I shut down my rig, put on my sneakers, and went out to get coffee. The city was loud. That was good. Horns, chatter, the hiss of a bus's air brakes. I stood in line at the coffee shop, scrolling through my phone. The noise was a comfort. Next, the barista called. I stepped up. Hi, can I just get a large? It happened right in the middle of my sentence. The world vanished. It wasn't that I couldn't hear the coffee shop. The coffee shop was gone. The hiss of the espresso machine, the awful indie music, the murmur of the crowd, it was all amputated. Replaced by that same, pressurized, heavy void. It pushed on my eardrums. It felt like my head was suddenly 100 feet underwater. I must have frozen, my mouth half-open, my vision grayed at the edges. The silence was so profound, so absolute, I could hear my own heart thumping against my ribs, but the sound was dull, as if it was happening in the next room. It lasted, maybe a second, two, and then, like a physical blow, the sound of the world crashed back in. Black, the barista finished. She was looking at me, annoyed. I was breathing hard. What did you say? A large black coffee, she repeated, slowly, like I was an idiot. Yeah. Yes. Sorry. I fumbled for my card. My hands were shaking. I thought I was having a stroke. An aneurysm. Something. I grabbed the coffee and stumbled outside, leaning against the wall. The street sounds were normal. A jackhammer started up down the block. It was painfully, wonderfully loud. I was just catching my breath, telling myself it was a stress-induced hallucination, when I saw it. Across the street, a woman was walking her dog. She was talking on her phone, laughing. I couldn't hear her from here, but I could see her mouth moving. She was walking. Laughing. And then, she wasn't. Her body just stopped. Mid-laugh. 1 foot in the air. Her dog, a little golden retriever, froze at the same instant, its tail held perfectly still. A pigeon, which had been pecking at the ground, was a stone statue. For a full 3 seconds, nothing on that street moved. Except me. Then, just as suddenly, the woman completed her laugh. The dog's tail wagged. The pigeon's head snapped up. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't a lack of sound. The world itself was buffering. I ran home. I didn't bother with the lights. I threw the locks on my door and sprinted to my studio. I powered everything on, my heart hammering. I opened the Kessler Murders audio file. I stared at the 1.5-second canyon. The void.my cursor was hovering over it. I zoomed in. I kept zooming, past the second marks, past the milliseconds, pushing the software to its absolute limit, staring at the hard, vertical edge where the host's voice just stopped. It wasn't a clean line, the edge of the void, it was jagged. It looked frayed, and then, I swear to God, I saw it moved. I didn't touch a thing. I just watched. The black, empty canyon in the waveform, it grew. It ate the next millisecond of audio. The line of data just disappeared, consumed by the expanding, absolute nothing. I watched for a full minute as it slowly, hungrily, erased the host's voice, one tiny digital fraction at a time, and then my phone buzzed. It was a text from the podcast producer. Strange question. The host just called. He said he has no memory of recording the Kessler episode. At all. My heart was a fist, beating against the inside of my chest. I stared at the text from the producer, Sarah. He has no memory of recording the episode. I looked back at my monitor. The black, silent canyon in the audio file had just swallowed another half-second of the host's voice. It was expanding. I watched, mesmerized in cold terror, as the jagged, frayed edge of the void crept forward and ate another millisecond of the blue waveform. Click. Gone. I should have shut it down. I should have unplugged the machine. Instead, I did the stupidest thing I could possibly do. My hand, moving on its own, hit Ctrl+S. I saved it. I saved the corruption. The change. The erasure. No, I whispered. I immediately hit Ctrl+Z, undo. My entire system froze. The busy icon, a little blue spinning circle, appeared. It spun. And spun. Then, a pop-up window, cannot undo action. The operation buffer is empty. The original data, the host's voice, the words he did speak, wasn't just overwritten. It was gone. Wiped from the history of the file. As if it had never been there at all. A new, frantic thought seized me. My backups. I pay a small fortune for a cloud-based, version-controlled backup system. Every file, every change, is mirrored instantly. I pulled up my cloud drive. I found the project folder. The Kessler murders. The folder was empty. It wasn't that the files were deleted. The folder itself was just a hollow icon. No version history. No logs. No data. No, 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 no. My breathing was shallow. This wasn't just my file. This was the source. Was it spreading? Was it in my other projects? I have over a decade of work on these drives. Terabytes of sound. My entire career. I scrambled to open another project. Something safe. Something old. A simple ad spot I'd edited last month for a mattress company. I opened the file. The waveform looked normal. A 30-second stereo track. Voiceover. Gentle piano music. I clicked play. "Are you tired of tossing and turning?" the warm voice said. The piano tinkled. With the new, abyssal silence, you'll sleep sounder than ever before. I yelped and threw my headphones onto the desk. It was there. A 1-second void. It had infected my other files. I stared at the waveform. But the waveform was fine. On the screen, the Blue Mountain range of the audio file was perfect. There was no canyon. There was no flat line. According to the software, the audio for the mattress brand name was there. The meters were jumping. The data was present. But when I put my headphones back on and played it, there was nothing. The void. That same, heavy, pressurized, listening silence. It was learning. It wasn't just deleting data anymore. It was hiding inside it. It was replacing the audio, but leaving the visual data shell behind. It was wearing the skin of the .wav file. My phone rang, and I screamed. It was Sarah. I snatched it up. "Alex? Alex, thank God. Something is wrong." Her voice was high, trembling. "Sarah, it's in my files. It's spreading." "Forget the files," she cut me off, almost sobbing. "It's me, Alex. I don't remember. I don't remember hiring you for this episode." The blood drained from my face. "What are you talking about? We emailed all last week. I just sent you the file." "I know," she cried. "I'm looking at the emails. I see our conversation. I see the contract. But Alex, I have no memory of writing them. I don't know who Ken Fletcher is. I don't remember anything about the Kessler murders." "Ken," I said, my voice wouldn't. "The host. You texted me. You said he forgot." "I called him back," Sarah whispered. I asked him to look at his research. He's a true crime host. He had a whole office wall of string boards, notes, case files. He just sent me a picture. It's blank. The wall is empty. A new, deeper cold settled in my stomach. "Sarah, what does that mean?" "It means," she said, her voice cracking, "that the Kessler murders don't exist. I've been searching online for the last 20 minutes. There's no public record. No news articles. No victims. The case is gone. It's not just that we forgot it, Alex. It's like it never happened." The silence on the line stretched out. It wasn't the void. It was just a normal, terrified, human silence. The void, it wasn't just deleting the recording. It was deleting the event. It was uncooking the meal. It was erasing the past. "I have to go," I said, and hung up. My apartment felt wrong. The air was too still. I needed a sound. Any sound. I walked into my kitchen and fumbled for a glass. I turned on the tap. The sound of water splashing was a relief. My hand was shaking violently. The glass slipped. It hit the tile floor and shattered. The sound was glorious. Loud, sharp, chaotic, real. I almost laughed. It was the most real thing I'd heard all day. Okay, I breathed. Okay. Just clean it up. I grabbed the dustpan and brush from under the sink. I knelt and started sweeping up the larger pieces, the tinkle of glass on plastic another small, comforting sound. I brushed the big shards into the pan. All that was left was the fine, glittery dust. The tiny splinters. I stared at the floor. And I watched, as one of the larger splinters of glass just stopped. It wasn't that it dissolved. It didn't fade. It just ceased. It vanished. My breath hitched. The tiny shard next to it, gone. And the one next to it. And the one next to that. The void was here. In my apartment. It wasn't in my headphones anymore. It was cleaning. It was methodically, silently, erasing the evidence that the glass had ever broken. In under 5 seconds, the floor was clean. Not a speck. Not a glint. I looked at my left hand, which I'd used to brace myself on the floor. There was a small, bright red cut on my palm from a tiny shard. A single drop of blood welled up. I stared at it. Please, I thought, please stay. The drop of blood wavered. It lost its color, shifting to a dull, static gray, and then it was gone. The skin on my palm resealed itself. The cut was gone. A wave of disorienting, nauseating dizziness washed over me. I blinked. Why was I on the floor? I looked at my hand. I was holding a dustpan. It was empty. My kitchen was perfectly clean. I couldn't remember. What was I doing? I stood up, confused. I couldn't remember dropping a glass. The dustpan was empty. My hand was steady. My kitchen was clean. There was no cut on my palm. There was no glass on the floor. There was no memory of a glass breaking. There was only a cold, hollow echo in my mind. A sense of wrongness. The feeling of waking up from a nightmare you can't remember, your heart still hammering against your ribs for a reason you can't name. Why was I on the kitchen floor? Why was I holding a dustpan? I stood up, my knees cracking. I felt lighter. As if something had been scooped out of me. My computer. The podcast file. Sarah. I ran back to my desk. The audio file was still open. The black, jagged canyon was still there. It had consumed another 3 seconds of the host's audio. Sarah. I had to warn Sarah. I grabbed my phone. My thumb hovered over the recent calls icon. I had to tell her about the glass, about the cut. The what? The memory was a smooth, blank wall. I knew something had just happened in the kitchen, but I couldn't grasp the thought. It was like trying to pick up a bead of mercury. I clicked on my call log. My last call wasn't from Sarah. It was from my sister, 2 days ago. My stomach turned to ice. No. I scrolled through the log. Yesterday. The day before. Last week. Her call wasn't there. I slammed my thumb onto my text messages. I scrolled to her name. Sarah, producer. The conversation was there. Our texts from earlier. He has no memory of recording the episode. At all. I watched, my breath held in my throat, as that last text message from her flickered. It turned a pale, ghostly gray. And then it dissolved. It just vanished. The text bubble above it, my reply, vanished next. Then her text before that. One by one, from the bottom up, our entire conversation was being unwritten. It was like watching a fuse burn in reverse. In 10 seconds, the entire thread was gone. Her name, Sarah, producer, sat at the top of my inbox, but the conversation history was blank. Then, her name flickered. And it was gone. No! I shouted, dropping the phone. I frantically swiped to my contacts. I typed SARAH. No results found. No. Her last name, what's her last name? I couldn't remember. It wasn't that I'd forgotten it, like a name on the tip of your tongue. It was that the space in my brain where that information lived was now a cold, empty void. It was like reaching into a drawer for a pair of scissors and finding nothing but smooth, polished wood. She wasn't just deleted from my phone. She was being excised from my mind. The void was pruning her. It was erasing her from the world, and now it was cleaning up the memory of her. I was next. I stumbled back to my workstation, panting. I am an audio engineer. My life is data. My life is sound. The void is silence. It eats data. What if it's hungry? What if it's selective? It ate the clean, recorded human voice. It ate the event of the glass breaking. It's efficient. What if I give it something it can't digest? My hands were shaking so hard I could barely use the mouse. I opened a new, blank audio project. I created a new track. I armed it to record. I grabbed my best microphone, a heavy condenser mic, and pulled it close. My name is Alex, I spoke, my voice trembling. My name is Alex. I am an audio editor. There is a silence that erases things. It's erasing, it erased Sarah. A producer. I can't remember her last name. I can't remember. I looked at the screen. The beautiful, blue waveform of my voice appeared as I spoke. And, a fraction of a second behind it, a jagged black line was chasing it. The void. It was in my system. It was listening. And it was eating my words almost as fast as I could record them. I watched in absolute horror as the data of my own voice was consumed, millisecond by millisecond, erased from existence as I was creating it. No, you can't have it. I needed noise. Pure, unadulterated, chaotic noise. I opened my signal generator. It's a tool for testing speaker levels. I selected white noise. I slammed the engage button and cranked the main volume. My $3,000 studio monitors exploded with a sound that was not a sound, but a force. It was a deafening, static, physical wall of every audible frequency at once. It was the sound of a waterfall. It was the sound of an empty channel. It was the sound of everything and nothing. I looked at the screen. The recording track was a solid, saturated, impenetrable brick of blue data. The black, creeping line of the void. It stopped. It hit the wall of white noise and it hesitated. The jagged edge trembled. It couldn't find a gap. It couldn't find a clean, simple voice to eat. The noise was too dense. Too chaotic. It was indigestible. I almost laughed. A wild, hysterical bark. Choke on it. I yelled over the roar. Choke on that. I had found a weapon. I had found a shield. The static was screaming. My ears were ringing, even through the noise. But I was safe. And then, the lights in my studio flickered. I looked at the lamp on my desk. The bulb was wavering, not like a power surge, but like a flame in a wind. The room grew colder. I turned. In the far corner of my studio, by my bookshelf, the shadows were wrong. They were deeper. The white noise wasn't being erased. So the void had moved on. It couldn't eat the sound. So, it was starting to eat the light. The sound was a physical weight. It wasn't just in my ears, it was in my teeth, in my skull. It pressed on my skin. I had my studio monitors cranked to a level that would tear the speakers in a week, but I didn't care. It was the only thing keeping the black line from eating my reality. But it was only protecting the sound. I stared at the corner of my room. The shadow by the bookshelf wasn't just a shadow. A shadow is a lack of light. This was a hole in the light. It was an absence. It was black, but it wasn't a color. It was the way you'd imagine a tear in the fabric of the universe. It was a patch of nothing, shaped like a man's silhouette, only taller, distorted, and wavering. I watched, frozen, as the edge of the nothing touched a framed photo on my bookshelf. It was a picture of me and my sister at the beach. The nothing didn't burn it. It didn't break it. It unmade it. The part of the frame it touched just ceased to be. The glass. The wood. The pigment on the photo paper. It vanished. The void crept over the picture, and my sister's smiling face was erased. But the memory wasn't. Not yet. I remembered her. I remembered that day. The white noise was insulating me. It was too loud, too chaotic for the void to get into my head while it was also here, in the room with me. The void, it hated the noise. I could see it recoiling from the sound waves. The physical pressure of the static was like a force field. The hole in the corner pulsed, shrinking back every time a new wave of static crashed over it. But it was strong. It held its ground, a small, stubborn patch of anti-existence, and it kept eating. It ate the bookshelf. The wood, the screws, the books. They didn't fall. They were just deleted. It ate a chunk of the drywall behind it. I could now see the insulation inside my wall. The void touched a yellow strand of fiberglass. Gone. It ate the wall stud. Gone. In its place was just more of the void. It wasn't a hole into my neighbor's apartment. It was a hole into nowhere. The roar of the static was my shield, but it was also my prison. I was trapped in this room. The sound was so loud, I couldn't hear anything else. I couldn't hear the city outside. I couldn't hear my own movements. I couldn't hear if there was something else in the apartment. And then, a new, terrible thought hit me. The power. My computer, my audio interface, my speakers, they were all plugged into the wall. The void was eating the wall. It was eating the wiring. The lamp on my desk, which had been flickering, now buzzed in agony. The light it cast was a sick, strobing yellow. It was starving. I had minutes. Maybe seconds. I had to move. I had to take the noise with me. I scrambled for my bag. My field recorder. It's a small, handheld digital recorder I use for location sound. It has batteries. It has a small, tinny built-in speaker. It wouldn't be as strong as my studio monitors. But it was something. I grabbed it. I unplugged my headphones from my main interface. The white noise screamed from the desk speakers. I plugged the headphones into the field recorder. I opened my sound library. Noise_bed_white.wave. I selected the file. I hit play. I jammed the headphone volume to maximum. The KSSSSSSSHHHHHH filled my head. It was thinner, tinier, but it was there. A personal, portable shield. Good. Now, the speaker. I turned off the headphone-only monitor. The tiny built-in speaker on the recorder crackled to life. KSSSSSSSHHHHHHHHH. It was a pathetic, weak sound compared to the roar from my monitors. It sounded like a leaking tire. The void in the corner noticed. The wavering, man-shaped hole grew. It surged forward, expanding across the wall. It knew I was trying to leave. The lamp on my desk gave one final, desperate pop. The bulb went black. The light from my computer monitors was the only thing left. And the white noise from my main speakers. It stuttered. KSSSSSHHHHH. KSSSHH. KSS. The void was at the power outlet. I was out of time. I ripped the studio headphones off my head and jammed a pair of in-ear earbuds into my ears, connected to the field recorder. I needed to hear the world and the noise at the same time. I turned on the recorder's built-in speaker. KSSSSSSSHHHHHH. It was the only sound I could make. I stood up. My hand was on the doorknob of my studio. Beyond this door was my living room. My kitchen. My front door. My studio is soundproofed. Designed to keep the world out. But right now, it was keeping the white noise in. As the last of my studio speakers died, a new sound began. A sound from outside my studio door. It was the opposite of the white noise. It was a silence. A sucking, heavy, pressurized silence that was beating against the other side of my door. A thump, thump, thump of pure, absolute nothing. It knew I was in here. And it was waiting. The silence on the other side of the door wasn't just quiet. It was an anti-sound. It had a pulse. Thump. Hush. Thump. Hush. Thump. It was the sound of a giant, invisible heart trying to beat, but instead of blood, it was pumping nothingness. It was a vacuum, pulling at the seams of my soundproof door. The wood groaned. In my hand, the small recorder felt pathetic. KSSSSSSSHHHHHHHHH. Its tiny speaker was a gnat against a hurricane. The roar in my earbuds was stronger, a desperate KSSSSSSSHHHHHHH that was the only thing keeping my own thoughts from being pulled apart. I had to move. My studio was a tomb. The void had eaten the power, the light. The darkness in the room was thick and absolute, save for the glow of my phone screen in my other hand. My hand was on the doorknob. It was freezing cold. Not metal cold. It was absence of heat cold. I turned it. The door flew open, yanked inward by the pressure. I stumbled out into my living room, and the weak KSSSSSSSH from my recorder was instantly swallowed. My living room was wrong. It wasn't dark. It wasn't empty. It was simplified. The light from the street, which should have been streaming through the big bay window, was a dull, flat, gray. It had no warmth. It cast no shadows. My sofa was still there, but it looked wrong. Like a bad 3D model that hadn't finished rendering. The texture was smooth. The cushions had no wrinkles. The vibrant blue-gray fabric was just gray. The void wasn't just eating things. It was draining them first. Draining the detail. The color. The life. It was erasing the concept of sofa and leaving behind a placeholder. Thump. Hush. Thump. The sound was louder here. It was coming from everywhere. The walls, the ceiling. My entire apartment was inside a dying heart. And then I saw them. In the studio, it had been one. Here, there were three. The man-shaped holes. The absences. They were drifting. They moved with a slow, boneless grace, like patches of oil on water. They had no features. They were just perfect, tall, wavering silhouettes of nothing. One was gliding over my television. The screen dissolved as it passed, leaving a gaping hole in the entertainment center. Another was standing by the kitchen, methodically unmaking my refrigerator. It didn't open the door. It just touched it. And the white enamel vanished, revealing the racks and food inside, which then also vanished. The third one, it was standing right by my front door, blocking my exit. It turned. It had no eyes. It had no face. But I felt it see me. The KSSSSSSSHHHHHHH in my earbuds spiked, as if in panic. The gray, flat light in the room dimmed. The thumping silence grew faster. Thump hush thump hush thump hush. It knew I was shielded. The noise in my ears was a bubble, and it hated it. The void shape by the door drifted towards me. It raised an arm that was just a tear in the world. I scrambled backward, holding the tiny recorder out like a cross. KSSSSSSSHHHHHHHHH. The shape recoiled. The weak sound from the speaker was just enough to sting it. It was like spraying a hornet. It hissed, a sound that was just a sudden rush of cold air, and backed away. It was weak. The physical noise could hurt them. Get away! I screamed. My voice sounded thin and tiny, drowned out by the static in my head. The other two shapes turned. They had heard me. They began to drift from the kitchen, from the TV. Converging. I was trapped between them and the one at the door. My front door. My keys. My keys. They were in the ceramic bowl on the small table by the door. The table the first shape was guarding. I looked at the table. The void shape was floating right beside it. It wasn't eating the table. It was just waiting. It knew. I took a step forward. The shape twitched. I took another. It surged, not at me, but at the table. It swept its arm of nothing over the wood. The ceramic bowl vanished. My keys vanished. The table vanished. No! I ran for the door. The shape was in my way. I shoved the little recorder, speaker first, right at its center. KSSSSSSSSHHHHHHHHH. It screamed. It was a horrible, imploding sound. The shape shattered, not into pieces, but into a dozen smaller, writhing holes that splattered against the wall and dissolved, leaving the drywall pristine and untouched. It had retreated. I grabbed the doorknob. The thumping was deafening. Thump hush, I yanked the door open. The other two shapes were gliding across the room at a terrifying speed. I fell out into the hallway, slamming the door behind me. I didn't lock it. I had no keys. I leaned against the wall, panting, the static roaring in my ears. KSSSSSSSHHHHHHHHHH. I was safe. I was out. I looked up. The hallway. It was gone. The beige carpet, the cheap framed art, the doors to my neighbors' apartments. It was all gone. I was standing on a narrow, floating strip of my building's floor. On all sides, above, below, in front of me, was nothing. Just a black, cold, silent, starless void. My apartment building hadn't been erased. My world had been. The void, it hadn't just been in my apartment. My apartment was the last piece left. And I had just locked myself out. The KSSSSSSSHHHHHHH in my earbuds was a thin, brittle wall against infinity. I was standing on a floating island of beige, industrial-grade carpet. It was maybe 30 feet long, the exact length of my apartment hallway. But there were no walls. No ceiling. No light. Below me, above me, to all sides, was nothing. It wasn't blackness. Blackness is a color. This was an unspace. It was the period at the end of the universe. I was breathing, but the air was cold, thin, and had no smell. It felt like I was breathing pure, sterile data. The only real things in this new, impossible existence were me, my clothes, the handheld recorder in my fist, and this strip of floating floor. Behind me was the door. My front door. Apartment 4B. It stood alone, a single, solid rectangle of wood and metal, anchored to the strip of carpet, a monument to a world that was gone. Thump hush. Thump hush. Thump hush. The pulse was stronger out here. It wasn't a sound, it was a pressure. It was the heartbeat of the void. And with every beat, I felt a wave of profound, suicidal loneliness. A deep, cold, logical suggestion that I should just step off. That it would be easier to just stop. No, I whispered. The static in my ears roared in agreement. The noise was my anchor. It was the only thing keeping me. I crept forward, away from the door, toward the other end of my floating island. The carpet ended in a perfect, clean-cut edge. As if a giant cookie cutter had sliced it out of reality. I knelt. I could see the cross-section. Carpet. Padding. Plywood subfloor. Below it, just the nothing. I fumbled in my pocket. I found a lip balm. My fingers were numb. I tossed it over the edge. It didn't fall. It just wasn't. The second it left the real platform, it ceased to exist. It was unmade. I scrambled back, my heart hammering. I was a prisoner on a 30-foot-long, 4-foot-wide plank, floating in an abyss. My eyes fell to the recorder in my hand. The little green battery icon. It was at 60%. A new, colder, more specific terror clawed at my throat. My shield was finite. The static wasn't just my sanity, it was my life support. When that battery died, my mind would be next. And then, me. Thump hush thump hush thump hush. The pulse was faster. And louder. I looked at the far edge of the platform, the one I had just peered over. With a soundless pop, a 2-foot section of the carpet and floor vanished. It was gone. My island had just shrunk. The void was eating my foothold. With every beat of its terrible, silent heart, the nothingness was inhaling my world. No, 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 no. I crab-walked backward, my eyes fixed on the disappearing edge. Thump hush, another piece. Gone. My 30-foot island was now 25. It was coming for me. I was being herded. I was being pushed back toward the only other place in existence. My apartment. I scrambled backward until my shoulders hit the solid wood of my front door. It was the only solid thing to touch. It was a trap. It knew I had escaped. And it had erased the world to force me back in. Back in, with the other two. The shapes that were still in there. The far edge of the platform was gone. The void was now just 10 feet away. Thump hush, 5 feet. I was standing on a patch of carpet no bigger than a doormat. Thump hush, the nothing was now touching the toes of my sneakers. I screamed as the concept of rubber and canvas was unmade. My shoes dissolved. I stumbled back, my bare feet hitting the doormat. The void was licking at my feet. I had no choice. It was the void, or the shapes. I turned. My hand, shaking so hard I could barely aim, grabbed the cold doorknob. The KSSSSSSSHHHHHHHHH in my ears felt impossibly small. The thumping was all around me. I twisted the knob. And I threw myself back inside. I fell through the doorway, sprawling onto the hardwood floor of my own apartment. I kicked the door shut with my bare foot. It closed with a dull, heavy thud. The silence was gone. The thump hush of the abyss was replaced by the low, sick hum of my apartment. It was the sound of a dying refrigerator, but magnified 1,000 times. A low, 60-cycle hum that vibrated in my bones. KSSSSSSSHHHHHHHHH. The tiny speaker on my recorder was still chirping. The white noise in my earbuds was my only comfort. I scrambled to my feet, my back pressed against the door, my chest heaving. The apartment was darker. The flat, gray light from the window was almost gone, as if it were permanent twilight. The simplification was worse. My living room looked like a stage set built from memory. The sofa was a single, smooth block of gray. The lamp was a simple cylinder. The details were gone. The textures, the colors, the personality, it had all been drained. The two shapes were still here. They weren't drifting anymore. They were working. The first one was in my studio. The door was open. It was standing over my desk, my monitors, my audio interface. It had its nothing hand resting on my main computer tower. The computer wasn't vanishing. It was just dead. The lights were off. The screen was black. The shape was draining it. It wasn't eating the object, it was eating the data. It was erasing my work. Decades of my life, my entire portfolio, being unwritten from the hard drives. The second shape. It was in my bedroom. It was moving with a slow, methodical purpose. It glided past my bed. It touched the pillow. The pillow didn't vanish. It just sagged. It became a flat, featureless white rectangle, as if all the memory of pillow had been pulled out of it. It moved to my dresser. It opened a drawer, not with its nothing hand, but by willing it. The drawer slid open silently. The shape hovered over the contents. My shirts. It touched a blue t-shirt. The color drained from it. It turned a flat, lifeless gray. It touched another. Gray. Another. Gray. It was curating my existence. It was sterilizing me. It wasn't just erasing my past, like Sarah, or the Kessler murders. It was erasing my present. It was erasing Alex. I watched in frozen horror as it moved to the wall, to a cluster of framed photos. Me at graduation. Me with my family. It brushed its hand across them. The glass didn't break. The frames didn't fall. The images just faded. The faces blurred, the colors ran together into a uniform, brownish-gray smear, and then, nothing. Just empty, gray paper inside the frames. This was the plan. It wasn't to kill me. It was to unmake me. To erase every scrap of evidence that I had ever been a person, until I was just a concept. And then, to erase the concept. The shape in my bedroom paused. It turned. The shape in my studio turned. They both looked at me, faceless and terrifying. They knew I was back. And they knew I was holding the noise. KSSSSSSSSHHHHHHHHH. The little recorder felt impossibly small. The battery icon, I could see in the dim light. 45%. I was on a timer. The two shapes began to glide toward me, out of the bedroom, out of the studio. They moved in perfect, silent unison. They were hurting me again, trapping me against the front door, the door that led to nothing. No, I whispered. I held the recorder out. Stay back. They didn't stop. The weak noise from the speaker, it wasn't enough anymore. They had adapted. It annoyed them, like a fly, but it didn't hurt them. They were 10 feet away. 5. The one from the studio, the one that had been eating my data, was closer. It reached. Its arm of anti-reality stretched. I didn't move. I couldn't move. It didn't touch me. It touched the recorder. Its nothing fingers wrapped around the cheap plastic casing. I screamed. The recorder didn't vanish. But the white noise changed. The sound in my earbuds exploded. It wasn't a clean KSSSSSHHHHH anymore. It tore. It became a glitch. A stutter. KSSSH KSS KSS click dash hush SHHHH KSS 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 click dash hush SHHHHH. It was a sound war. The clean, pure noise was being infected by the clean, pure silence. They were fighting, inside the circuits of the recorder. And it was agony. The sound tore at my eardrums, a physical, stabbing pain. But the shape, it screamed. The silent, imploding shriek from the hallway. It ripped its hand back. The nothing of its fingers was flickering. It looked like a TV station that wasn't tuned in, glitching between being and not being. The corrupted noise, it was hurting it. It was poison to it. But it was poison to me, too. KSSSH click dash hush SHHHHH. With every hush, my vision blacked out. With every KSSSHH, it came back. The world was strobing. In, out, in, out. And in those fractions of a second of blackness, I saw something. Not with my eyes. In my mind. A flash. A single, perfect, crystal clear memory. A woman's face. Laughing. Red hair. Sarah. The name. It was there. KSSSH click dash hush SHHHHH. Blackness. Another memory. A file name. Kessler underscore murders underscore host underscore track underscore v2.wave ksSSH click dash hush shhhhhh. Blackness. My hand. A cut on my palm. A single, bright red drop of blood. The void hadn't erased the memories. It had filed them away. It had hidden them. And this new, broken sound, this noise and void hybrid, it was unlocking them. It was like a lockpick, glitching the system. The pain was blinding. I collapsed to my knees, clutching my head, the earbuds screaming. The two shapes were writhing, hissing in the dark, flickering as the broken sound washed over them. The recorder in my hand was vibrating violently, the plastic hot to the touch. The part of it the shape had touched, it was glowing. A faint, sick, purple light. It wasn't just a weapon anymore. It was something else. KSSSH click dash hush shhhhhh. KSSSH click dash hush shhhhhh. The sound was a spike driven through my brain. The pain was absolute. I was on my knees, hands clamped over the earbuds, but the sound was inside my skull, a rhythmic, agonizing pulse of static and anti-static. But with every hush, a memory slammed back into me. KSSSH click dash hush. Sarah. Her last name was McKenna. She always chewed on her pens, shhhhhh. KSSSH click dash hush. The host of the podcast. Ken Fletcher. He had a dog named Barnaby, shhhhhh. KSSSH click dash hush. The Kessler murders. They were real. The victims were the Miller family. 2 parents. 1 child. It wasn't a true crime case. It was a test. The void's first erasure. The memories were so sharp, so real, they were more painful than the noise. They were pieces of my mind that had been amputated, and now they were being crudely stapled back into place. The 2 shapes were writhing. The corrupted noise was poison to them. It was existence and non-existence blended, a logical paradox that was tearing them apart. They flickered in and out, their edges blurring. One of them, the one that had been in my studio, lunged. It wasn't attacking me. It was attacking the recorder in my hand. It knew the source. It was a single, desperate, suicidal charge to stop the sound. Its arm of nothing came slashing down. I didn't think. I reacted. I screamed and shoved the recorder forward, not as a shield, but as a weapon. Get out! The purple, glowing crack on the recorder's plastic casing flared. It wasn't just a light. It was a lens. A beam of the corrupted, strobing, KSSSH-hush shhhh sound shot out. It wasn't a sound wave, it was a visible, flickering shaft of purple-black light. It hit the shape. The shape froze. It reared back. The silent, imploding shriek it made was different. It wasn't a retreat. It was agony. The nothingness of its form began to curdle. The void was being filled. It was like watching a black hole being force-fed matter. The shape solidified. Its skin of pure absence bubbled and tore, revealing, not insides, but a substance. It looked like burnt, magnetic tape. It hissed and popped. It tried to dissolve, to unmake itself. But the beam held it fast. It collapsed. It hit the hardwood floor not as nothing, but as something. A pile of black, brittle, smoking, ash. It was dead. Not erased. Dead. It had mass. It was real. A smell filled the air. Not brimstone. Not smoke. The smell of a dead electrical circuit. The smell of ozone and static. The other shape, the one from the bedroom, saw this. It knew what this meant. It didn't attack. It didn't hesitate. It fled. It dove, not for the door, but through the solid drywall of my living room. It didn't leave a hole. It just soaked into the wall, like a stain sinking into paper. It was gone. Silence. My apartment was empty. The horrible, agonizing strobe in my head stopped. But the sound didn't. KSSSH hush shhhhh, KSSSH hush shhhhh. The loop was still playing, but the pain was gone. The file had settled. The corrupted noise was no longer a spike, it was a pulse. A new heartbeat. A steady, rhythmic, purple-black light pulsed from the recorder, in time with the sound. KSSSH, light, hush, dark, shhhhh. Light. I was panting, my entire body soaked in sweat. My ears were ringing. I was alive. I looked at the pile of ash on the floor. It was real. I could touch it. I looked around my apartment, lit by the pulsing, purple-black light of the recorder. The grayness was receding. The corrupted noise, it was restoring things. I watched, mesmerized, as the dull, gray block of my sofa flickered. With every KSSSH of the light, the blue-gray color flashed back into existence. The texture of the fabric returned. The wrinkles in the cushions reappeared. It was re-rendering my world. The framed photos on the wall, the gray smears flickered. I saw a face. My mother. Smiling. KSSSH hush shhhhh. The image faded. KSSSH hush shhhhh. It came back, stronger. The void erased. This corrupted sound, it remembered. It was an undo command for the universe. I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't prey. I looked at the recorder in my hand. This glowing, hot, impossible tool. The battery icon flashed. 28%. I had a weapon. I had a purpose. But I was on a clock. I scrambled to my feet and looked at the front door. The door that led to the nothingness, the abyss where my world used to be. The thump hush. Thump hush was still out there. But it was slower. It sounded distant. It sounded afraid. I knelt in the center of my rematerializing living room, my world pulsing with purple-black light. KSSSH, the blue of the sofa flashed into being. Hush, it faded to gray, shhhhh. The blue returned, stronger. KSSSH, the faces in the photos reappeared. Hush, they vanished, shhhhh. They held, the smiles clear. The recorder was no longer just a recorder. The void shape's touch, combined with the white noise, had catalyzed it. The plastic casing around the glowing purple crack was hot. It was a symbiote. A hybrid of sound and silence. It was healing my apartment. It was rewriting the code. But the restoration was coming at a cost. I looked at the small screen. Battery, 21%. The undo command was draining the last of my power at a terrifying rate. The pulsing light was a hemorrhage. In maybe 20 minutes, the light would die. The KSSSH hush shhhhh would stop. And the void would win. The great, silent thump hush of the abyss would return and finish the job. I was in a tiny lifeboat, and the boat was healing itself by consuming the last of my food. No, I whispered. I scrambled to my feet. Power. I needed power. The wall outlets were dead. Useless. My laptop? The shape had drained it. Drained. My eyes snapped to the pile of black, brittle ash on the floor. The remains of the other shape. The smell of ozone was sharp. It hadn't eaten my data. It had drained it. The shapes, they were energy. They were leeches. When I killed it, what happened to the energy it had stolen? My hand was shaking. I clutched the pulsing recorder and approached the pile of ash. It was real. It had weight. It was the corpse of an impossible thing. I knelt. The recorder in my hand pulsed. KSSSH hush shhhhh. As the purple light washed over the ash stirred. The tiny, brittle flakes vibrated, lifting into the air like iron filings to a magnet. They were attracted to the recorder. To the crack. I took a breath. I held the recorder out, and I touched the glowing crack to the pile of dead static. The effect was instantaneous. The instant the crack made contact, the entire pile of ash leaped up. It streamed into the purple glowing crack with a sound like 1,000 tiny insects. Zrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr. It wasn't on it, it wasn't on it. It wasn't on it, it was in it. The purple light exploded, turning a blinding, brilliant white. The sound in my earbuds screamed, not in pain, but in power. KSSSSSSSSSSHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHIt was the original, pure, perfect white noise. But 1,000 times louder. 1,000 times cleaner. The recorder was so hot I almost dropped it. The light and sound held for a full 3 seconds, and then settled. The light returned to its purple-black pulse. The sound returned to its corrupted, hybrid KSSSH hush SHHHH. But it was deeper. It was stronger. The bass of it vibrated the floor. I fumbled with the recorder, my heart pounding. I looked at the screen. The battery icon was full. 100%. It was flashing, as if it were overcharged. The floor where the ash had been was clean. Oh my God, I breathed. It wasn't a battery. It was a vessel. The void steals reality. The shapes are the stolen reality. And the recorder, it takes it back. The enemy wasn't just the enemy. It was the fuel. I wasn't a survivor. I wasn't prey. I was a hunter. I stood up, the pulsing recorder feeling heavy and powerful in my hand. My apartment was almost whole. The colors were vibrant. The textures were real. But the other shape, the one that fled, it was still out there. And it was full. It was a battery pack of stolen reality. My neighbor's reality. It had fled through the wall. I walked to the wall it had disappeared into. The wall I shared with 4C. I placed my hand on it. The drywall was cold. I held the recorder up, the pulsing purple light washing over the paint. KSSSH hush SHHHH. Where the light hit the wall flickered. It became transparent. Like a window. For a fraction of a second, with every KSSSH dash, I could see through it. I saw my neighbor's apartment. It was gone. It was all gone. It was just the abyss. The infinite, starless nothing. The shape hadn't fled next door. It had fled back into the void. It was out there. With the great, silent heartbeat. I ran to my front door, the one that opened onto my tiny, floating platform. I had a full charge. I had a weapon. I wasn't trapped in here. They were trapped out there, with me. I grabbed the doorknob. The recorder pulsed in my other hand, a steady, reassuring KSSSH hush SHHHH. I pulled the door open. The infinite nothingness stretched out before me. The narrow plank of my hallway floor was all that existed. The thump hush was still there. The heartbeat of the abyss. It was slow. Hesitant. I stepped out onto the platform. The cold, sterile air hit my face. I held the recorder high, like a torch. The purple-black beam shot out, cutting into the darkness. The light, it hit something. Far in the distance. So far, it looked like a star. A single, flickering light. KSSSH hush SHHHH. My light pulsed. In the distant light, it pulsed back. KSSSH hush SHHHH. It was the same rhythm. It wasn't a star. It wasn't a trap. It was another recorder. It was another survivor. I stood on the edge of my 4x4 patch of hallway. The nothingness was a cold, quiet sea, and the great thump hush was its tide. Far across the abyss, the other light pulsed. KSSSH hush SHHHH. A mirror of my own. I could see a shape near it. A person. My recorder was heavy in my hand, humming with power. 100%. Overcharged. It restored my apartment. It remembered the way things were. I looked at the clean, artificial edge of my platform. The rest of the hallway, it should be there. The memory of it was in my head. The concept of hallway was a file the void had tried to delete. I had the undo command. I stepped to the very edge. I aimed the recorder not at the void, but at the empty space where my neighbor's door should have been. "Okay," I whispered. My voice was drowned by the KSSSH hush SHHHH in my ears. "Let's build." I squeezed the recorder. I wasn't just passively pulsing the light. I was pushing it. I was willing it. The purple-black beam shot out. It hit the nothing. The sound changed. It strained. KSSSH hush SHHHHHHHHHHHH. KSSSH hush SHHHHHHHHHHHH. The SHHHHH was no longer a whisper. It was a roar. The sound of a forge. And where the beam hit, matter appeared. It flickered into existence. A patch of beige carpet. Plywood subfloor. It was working. I was rewriting reality. I was building a bridge out of pure, corrupted sound. My battery icon dipped. 98%. It cost power to create. I took a step onto the new piece of floor. It was solid. KSSSH hush SHHHHHHHHHHH. Another patch appeared. I took another step. I was 10 feet out from my door. 20 feet. The other light was closer. The figure was waving. And the abyss noticed. The thump hush stopped. A new sound began. A low, terrible, cosmic tearing. The sound of a system that has detected a virus. Me. From the nothingness below, they rose. The shapes. Not one. Not two. A swarm. They boiled up from the unspace, dozens of them, a writhing mass of absence, their silent, man-shaped forms climbing the air itself. They were coming for the light. For the noise. For me. The shape that had fled my apartment was with them, its form flickering, damaged. It pointed at me. They surged. I stopped building. I raised the recorder. I was hoping for this, I snarled. The first shape lunged, its arm of nothing raised to strike. I fired. The purple-black beam hit its center mass. ZRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRR It died, turning to a cloud of brittle, black ash. And before the ash could even fall, it streamed toward me. It flew into the glowing crack of the recorder. RRRR, the battery icon flashed. 100%. The second shape hit. I fired. ZRRRR, it died. The ash flew into me. 100%. The third. The fourth. I was a vortex. A reaper. This wasn't a battle. It was a harvest. They were made of the stolen reality. And I was taking it back. Come on. I roared, the sound lost in the glorious, corrupted noise. Feed me. They were leeches, and I was the fire. I burned them, and their stolen power fueled me. In 30 seconds, it was over. The swarm was gone. My bridge was surrounded by a cloud of reclaimed static. My battery icon was flashing 100%. It was full to bursting. I turned back to my work. KSSSH hush SHHHHHHHHHHH. I built my bridge. The other survivor was close. I could see her. A young woman, clutching her own pulsing recorder. And then, the thump hush returned. It was no longer a heartbeat. It was a war drum. Thump. 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 The nothingness itself flexed. From the infinite dark below my bridge, it rose. It wasn't a shape. It was a geography. A mountain of pure absence, so vast it blotted out the non-light of the void. It was the source. The heart of the void. And it opened. A maw. A hole in reality so vast it could swallow a city. It was going to unmake my bridge. My apartment. Me. The recorder in my hand was vibrating so hard I could barely hold it. It was full. It was overcharged with the ash of the entire swarm. It wanted to be unleashed. I looked at the heart. At the infinite, silent mouth. You ate my files, I whispered. You ate my city. I aimed the recorder at the center of the heart. Now, choke on it. I pushed every last volt of power. I dumped the buffer. I released everything. The sound wasn't a pulse. It was a scream. The sound of pure, absolute, original white noise. It was the sound of creation. The sound of everything at once. A beam, not of purple-black light, but of blinding, solid, impossible white, shot from the recorder. It hit the heart. The heart of the void recoiled. It tried to swallow the noise. It tried to erase it. But it was too much. It was too real. It was an indigestible file. The thump of its heart stuttered. The white beam filled it. And the heart of the void popped. It ruptured. A soundless explosion. But it wasn't an explosion of force. It was an explosion of color. The concept of red. The idea of blue. The memory of green. It unfurled across the nothingness. The KSSSSSHHHHHH died. The KSSSHHSHHHH died. The thump hush died. There was silence. A real silence. The gentle, empty silence of a world waiting. The abyss was gone. In its place, a soft, gray light. A sky. I looked down. My bridge was resting on ground. A vast, flat, endless plain of gray. It was a blank canvas. A newly formatted drive. The recorder in my hand was dead. The plastic was cracked and cool. It had spent itself. I heard a gasp. I turned. The other survivor. The woman. She was standing 20 feet away, on her piece of reality. A small square of park grass. She was holding her own dead recorder. We were the only two things in the new world. Is it over? She whispered. I looked at my apartment building, standing alone in the gray expanse. The only file left. I looked at her. No, I said. I let the dead recorder fall from my hand. It clattered on the floor. It's just started. We've got the blank file. Now, we have to edit.